Welcome to Rings and Things, where we discuss Tolkien adaptations and texts.
We're just two hobbits from the Shire, one bringing the other along on this adventure.
I'm your host, Agnes, and this is my co-host,
Recurring guest star,
JD. Today we're covering episodes 5 and 6 of Season 2 of Rings of Power. But first, I need to bring you another Shadowfax. In our last episode, I credited one of my favorite quotes to Winterbloom, but in fact, it is one of the other Ents who says that quote.
Oh, okay.
So I just wanted to correct that. I still really like the quote, regardless of who says it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go through and listen to every time I misnamed somebody and do one big Shadowfax. Because I do it every other episode.
Well, let's dive into our rings. First up, we have Khazad-dûm.
So it starts with Prince Durin confronting his dad, and he's using the ring to be able to see paths to mine in the mountain, and Prince Durin is pretty worried about this because he doesn't, fully trust that the ring even works, let alone is otherwise trustworthy. I like a small detail that he dismisses the workers in the mine to save them, even if he can't stop his dad from doing whatever he wants to do. It's good characterization. And so it kind of confuses me, but they're digging to get sunlight?
I think they're digging to create shafts for the light to come through, and they're probably also at the same time digging for more mithril.
Yeah, he says they were really excited. They made a big thing about the sun. They said those on the surface rely on the sun and are weak because of it, but they bring it to them, but they still have to deal with the sun going away when it sets, and I don't even know what the sunlight is for other than lighting. Is it just for lighting?
To grow plants, which, is kind of a version of lighting. But fundamentally, all life comes from the sun, so even dwarves under the mountains can't eat gold and stone.
Yeah, they definitely need... I get that they need to eat, but I don't know, they seem to be eating... I just didn't get why they were so, first of all, excited about the sun, and then acting how that it makes them more similar to the surface dwellers that they're bringing the sun in, not less, but they seem to somehow distinguish themselves.
The problem I see with this is putting down people on the surface for depending on the sun, because in reality, the Khazad-dûm dwarves have always been depending on the sun, same as everybody else.
Yeah, unless they're eating something that, grows off of volcanic vents, that's the only thing, in real-world biology that doesn't use the sunlight are some bacteria that don't get any access to the sun, live off the heat of volcanic vents.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's what the Durins are eating for their main course.
It looked like regular standard vegetables and meat and regular fare, not some sort of weird bacterial volcanic slop.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was odd. I think that Durin using sight to find paths in the mountain, and traditionally they use sound being at odds, is pretty cool. It's like they have two different lenses to show how to get through the mountain and how to mine that have completely different images of what to do.
Yeah. It's the sight that the ring is giving King Durin about where to dig versus the sound that the stone singers have been using up to this point.
Yes.
The dwarves have had a good relationship with the mountain using that stone singing gift, which, do you remember, does it say that it's from Aule? Or
I'm almost positive they mention it. They mention Aule a lot.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure they've mentioned that it was from him.
I think they explicitly say that the stone singing gift is from Aule. So the dwarves have this good relationship with the mountain with this Vala-induced gift. Mm-hmm. And now the king is using a ring to know how to mine the mountain in a way that goes against how the mountain has agreed to be mined. Mm-hmm. The mountain itself is what tells Disa and her companions that it's okay to mine here. But the ring takes away that consent of the mountain. Yeah,
it's quite interesting the way that King Durin is doing it. He probably justifies it in saying that if the mountain doesn't collapse on us, then it's justified. But he's finding ways to like exploit the system, you know?
It's treating the mountain as an object rather than an entity.
Right, yeah.
And I think this goes a long way to illustrating how the Rings of Power dwarven rings are shady.
Yeah, the dwarven rings definitely seem questionable.
I think Disa's right to be skeptical about disregarding the stone singing system given to them from Aule.
Yeah, disregarding that would not be good. Later on, we see Prince Durin kind of calling out Anatar Soren directly, and the rings. He goes to Celebrimbor, and he says, how much do you trust Anatar? How much do you trust these rings?
Yeah, Prince Durin is on to Anatar. He's not going to get sucked into his deceiving. Mm-hmm. Disa follows a stone ball that she buys, and this ball falls down a shaft, and she keeps following it. And eventually she gets to a point where the ball rolling reveals a monster. And I find this whole scene to be very contrived.
Yeah.
Dwarves would have explored any passage that was that accessible.
Yeah, seemed like it was like right next to their market square too.
Exactly. These dwarves aren't going to not have gone down that crack in the cave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they do.
So the fact that she's down here finding a monster that no one has seen up until this point, was not a fan of that.
Okay, so I have one but not two generous takes here.
Okay.
The first one is a little bit less fun, but maybe the monster just like moved in there and they'd already been down there. But
it seemed pretty abandoned.
Yeah. The second is maybe this is somehow newly opened up from King Durin, and it was never explored because the dwarven singing kind of told him not to go down that path.
Mm-hmm. I like the newly opened up by the recent events. It could have been the earthquake as well. Yeah,
but I still think, like, if it's right in town square, dwarves definitely would be going down there.
Yeah, I don't think Disa would have been your first one down there, even in that case.
Yeah, I feel like a new crack right downtown, it's like prime real estate for a dwarf.
Yeah, and these dwarven merchants, I'm sure, would have set up shop there, because if Disa can go after a falling rock, customers can go there too.
Yeah, or, you know, like, they could make a bunch of nice dwarven studio apartments right downtown.
Yeah, that would, like you said, prime real estate.
Yeah, no, I didn't get that scene at all. And it didn't seem like it came to much anyway.
You'll see later on.
So, King Durin eventually has a meeting with Anatar Sauron, and he declines his offer to get more mithril, but only because of greed. Only because he knows that he explains to his son, like, that war is coming and everyone's going to want this, so why give it to the first seller? Let them come back. He's almost doing the right thing for the wrong reason. It's like the opposite of the ends justifying the means.
Yeah. I noted this as the greed of the Seven Rings was thwarting Anatar's ability to make the Nine.
Yeah.
And so I saw in this an instance of not evil undoing itself, but evil hindering itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a good illustration of that. Even if it's not complete undoing, it's kind of showing how it's the consequences for his actions, more or less, right? He makes these corrupted rings, and now he has to deal with a corrupted king.
Yeah. Sauron would have an easier time getting more mithril if he hadn't already handed out 7 corrupted rings.
Yeah. Yeah, I've mentioned this a couple times. I feel like Sauron, and then also in episode 1 when we were talking about, I think it was his boss, the elves fought in the First Age. Morgoth. They seem like they need opposition, I feel like. Like, they set it up for themselves. And I think that's on purpose sometimes.
Well, there's always going to be someone to oppose evil. So the fact that they're always opposed, I think, is credit to the world it's in, not not them purposely setting up opposition.
Well, so Morgoth taught the elves how to use arms and armor, though. And, you know, Sauron made the rings so that the elves who are going to oppose them could stay in Middle-earth. I feel like there's no good explanation that if they were really just solely focused on their goals and not also having an opponent to fight or something, then they would have probably at least, like, and I think if they had a few examples of this, they would, like, be able to stop people from coming to the power who eventually oppose them. Like, nip it in the bud.
Morgoth was on probation at the time, and this was the most chaos he could cause at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I didn't read the Silmarillion at all. That's where this is mostly covered.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm really going just based off the prologue from this show.
Yeah, which does not do a good job representing it, I would say.
It's very brief. I get that if they really wanted to cover it in detail, it probably would have been like a whole arc or season even.
Yeah.
You know?
When I say that Rings of Power didn't do a good job with it, I mean it didn't do a good job conveying all the details and nuance that goes into this. It's cut out the entire story of the Silmarils.
Yeah.
It's not even part of what motivates the story, which is fine. I think they did a great job adapting the parts they needed into a visually stunning, well-told prologue. But using this prologue to measure the nature of Morgoth's evil is probably going to be lacking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was also using our brief discussion too.
Yeah.
And I don't know as much about Morgoth personally, but Sauron and a lot of the evil in Lord of the Rings that I've seen just seems to, maybe it's like trying to be indicative of the pride, but they seem to set up their enemies so many times.
Morgoth is a nihilist. He wants to destroy the existence of the world and everything in it. Sauron is a micromanager. He wants to order and control everything that exists. He does not want to see it destroyed.
At this point in the story, is Morgoth even a thing anymore, or is Sauron still working for him?
Morgoth has been defeated, and he's a story of the past who has given rise to Sauron.
Yeah, so it seems and his goals are completely separate from Morgoth, too.
Yeah. I thought that Durin's performance when he was describing his father was very moving. When he's talking about watching his father become corrupted by the ring.
Yeah, definitely. Durin's actor might be my pick for like the best actor. Like if we're talking about like his performance with like conveying emotions and moving phrases and stuff like that.
His is really good. I like Charlie Vickers too. Sauron.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of good candidates, that's for sure. I know I've caught myself looking at Prince Durin after like a scene where he really had a chance to shine and just like, wow, this guy's good.
Yeah, he really is.
Disa at the end is again scheming again, but this time it's a little bit more genuine. She seems like she might have genuine concerns. There was just that one weird scene earlier where she kind of was scheming for out of power at the end of season, like out of like Mal and 10 at the end of season 1. That really puts a dark mood to this scene. I don't know if that's on purpose or what's going on there.
Yeah, we're gonna have to watch her character.
Her screaming in that tunnel was really funny though. Like to summon those bats.
Yeah,
I definitely was laughing out loud once they were like, "Was that supposed to like scare us away?"
Next up, we have the Eregion storyline with Celebrimbor and Anatar.
Yeah, so early on, it kind of, and this is far before they're negotiating for more mithril, but they're talking about how happy the dwarves are with their rings. Then they explain why one of the dwarven gates has an elvish password. And I assume this is the Speak Friends and Enter gate.
Melon. Yes.
Yes. Which I never noticed how odd it was that dwarves who hate elves would have an elvish passcode. But this is a great explanation for it.
And this is the canonical explanation, more or less.
Oh, wow.
Narvi the dwarf and Celebrimbor the elf were great friends. And they crafted a bunch of things together. This was in a simpler time when dwarves and elves did have some friendships. And Celebrimbor and Narvi made these doors together.
Yeah. Who's Navi? Is he kind of been spread out to a couple different dwarves, his role?
Narvi is still in there. He's just a minor character. And this is like the only scene we've gotten with Narvi and Celebrimbor. The show really is not demonstrating their friendship the way it's, I won't say portrayed in the book, but
mentioned.
Yeah, the impression one gets is not, I would say, accurately represented in the show. Precisely, the doors say, "The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak friend and enter. I, Narvi, made them. Celebrimbor of Holland drew these signs."
Got it. And is that in the, is that in the Silmarillion?
No, this is in the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, okay. Celebrimbor, for a minute here, kind of has some stunning clarity. He starts to suspect Anatar. He says that he keeps sowing seeds in people's mind and letting them think it's their own, which I've been kind of saying for a while is what he's been doing, you know?
Yeah. And even though Celebrimbor calls him out on this, Anatar still manages to sweet-talk him. Mm-hmm. Flattery gets Anatar everywhere. He's such a master manipulator.
Yeah, with Celebrimbor, he says, "Oh, you're just stressed from too much work." In this scene also, Sauron, they were arguing about him going to speak to the dwarves about getting more mithril, and Celebrimbor was trying to say, "No, we're not doing it. We're not making these rings for men." So Sauron says, "I'd like to speak to them now," in a very forceful tone. I feel like it's very on point for him. It doesn't seem like he's a patient guy.
Yeah, and if memory serves, I felt like when he said this, it was almost like he was asserting his will in a magical way.
Yeah, that could be. This was just before or just after, or maybe even during, when things were kind of physical between Anatar and Celebrimbor. You know, he shoved him, and then Anatar grabbed onto him. Mm-hmm. I think this was exactly when it was, and then it did seem to kind of mellow out immediately. So there could be something to that. He mentions that the 9 rings for men are 3 perfected to 3, so I kind of get now a lot more, and then 7 for the dwarves because if we're numerology, you want to avoid 6. So 3, and then 6 or 7, and then 9.
Yeah, my understanding is that 6 is a number of imperfection precisely because 7 is a number of perfection. 7 being the number of perfection is what makes 6 the number of imperfection.
Yeah, there's a lot going into it. Numerology is weird. That's all I'll say. But 6 is imperfection and the final stretch a lot of times, to my understanding, because 7 is perfection again.
Yeah, 6 is almost 7. It's not quite 7, and because it fails to be 7, then 6 takes on the role of being imperfect. Right. And this is how you get the number of the beast. 666 is 3 6s, so it's a perfect number of imperfection.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff going on with the different meanings of these numbers, and I think that this kind of wraps it up pretty nicely for me for this one in particular. Yeah. Because this has been bugging me since the prologue of the Fellowship, Yeah. They kind of come down to a compromise where Celebrimbor isn't going to work on the rings, but he's going to let them use his forge, which I think he should just stop them from using his forge. It's his forge, But
he doesn't want to alienate Anatar. Mm-hmm. And the way the show overlays Celebrimbor's lying letter with Anatar taking over his forge, like you point out, I think that this film device serves to show the grave that Celebrimbor has dug for himself. He's telling his king that they're shutting down the forge as the forge is continuing to be used not even by him. He's not only continuing to keep the forge open, he's lost control of his forge so that somebody else is straight up using it.
In fact, Avatar says, as someone who manipulates metals, careful someone is not manipulating you, in reference to... I don't remember if he's trying to get him to distrust the dwarves or even his own people at that point, but I thought that was really funny that he's accusing him of being manipulated by other people.
And that's so manipulative.
I know, yeah. Yeah,
it's really one of those mostly true lies.
Yeah, he's like, are you sure? Think twice, somebody's... It's so good because it kind of strengthens Celebrimbor. He does feel like he's being manipulated, but it protects him. It's kind of like when you report a murder that you did, And now it kind of doesn't work because you're kind of the first suspect, but it makes it feel like, why would I have told on myself, Why would I have brought it to your attention if I did it?
Precisely to have that argument.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is probably my biggest problem with Season 2, what I'm about to explain. Mm-hmm. Elves should not become invisible by using rings of power.
Do you want me to kind of take a crack at based off of
Yeah.
our discussions from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So they have a spiritual self, so they can't kind of teleport to the spiritual plane like hobbits and presumably men would.
Yeah, exactly.
More or less, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you would have laid it out, explained it?
Yeah, my understanding of the metaphysics of Middle-earth is that elves have something of a dual nature. They exist in both the physical world and the spiritual world. Mm-hmm. And so putting on a ring of power is not going to rip them out of the physical world and place them into the spiritual world. Men, hobbits, dwarves are a little different, but men and hobbits live only in the physical world. It's not that they don't have souls, but they don't have an existence in this otherworldly, spiritual, unseen, ethereal plane. Mm-hmm. You know, it's another dimension, and you know, elves are just 4-dimensional beings, and humans and hobbits are just 3-dimensional beings.
Right.
And when a human or a hobbit puts on the ring of power, or any ring of power, really, they're pulled into this spiritual realm. So when Rings of Power is depicting elves putting on prototypes for the 9 rings and then disappearing, this is a distinct adaptational choice in direct conflict to my understanding of the metaphysics of the world.
Yeah, I guess since they were prototypes, I kind of figured it was a different form of invisibility. Like it's not the same type of invisibility that, you know, Frodo experienced. It was something else.
All their dialogue would be interpreted as though it's intended to be the same as Frodo's. Mm-hmm. Myrddania is said that she's brought into the unseen world, and there's where she sees this fiery being.
Yeah, the scene was hard for me to keep up with a lot, maybe because I noticed that it was poor world building, so I was trying to come up with explanations, and then it immediately clashed with those. I was grappling with it too, but that's the best I could come up with. But yeah, they are dragged into some sort of different world. You're right.
We talked about this at the very beginning of Rings of Power when we were talking about people not being able to let go of an adaptation choice because of what's in the lore. Mm-hmm. This is the quintessential point for me where my reason for not liking this is simply because it's not in the lore that way. I'm interested to see what story they want to tell with disappearing elves, mm-hmm. but it's distasteful to me solely because I know the lore and this ain't the lore.
It's also one of those things where where adaptations will shoehorn in something just to make it a reference. You know, The Hobbit did it with the graves of the ring wraiths, and even as much as we both love it, War of the Rohirrim had those dwarves, those orcs. War of the Rohirrim had those orcs looking for those rings at the end, which made no actual sense if you think about it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just like...
Yeah, exactly.
It's like just like a nudge to the audience without thinking about the deeper implications.
Mm-hmm. Except that, you know, I feel like disappearing elves it doesn't have that much payoff. At least with War of the Rohirrim, like, the orc scene was like the only tie back.
So if somebody had only seen the Peter Jackson films and then watched Rings of Power, they would probably just have thought, oh, wow, that's really cool that it shows that the rings disappear just like Frodo did. That's probably what they were going for.
But there's no reason to have to believe that the 9 would make you invisible. They do. Mm-hmm. The 9 rings do seem to make the men invisible. If we read Gandalf's conversation with Frodo in Bag End, I think there's good reason to believe that the 9 rings make the holders invisible, the men.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why we'd have to see that minor point. Mm-hmm. The dwarven rings already don't make the dwarves invisible, which is also perfectly fine according to my understanding of the metaphysics.
Yeah, I have questions on that one.
Aule made the dwarves especially resistant to the corrupting powers of Morgoth, which extends to the corrupting powers of Sauron. So they are uniquely stable in the physical world in a way that men and hobbits are not stable in the physical world. And so when a dwarf puts on a ring of power, he's not pulled into the spiritual realm due to his dwarven stability.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm not saying that this was good. I just think that they were just going for And maybe the writers themselves just didn't have a deep enough understanding, which is sad. It is, because the metaphysics of Lord of the Rings has been really interesting for me.
The show writers are very well educated on the lore, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume that most of the time they are, but then what other reason would they have to have such contradictory elements? I know that you said this was also basically a very well-founded fan theory, right?
There's elements of my understanding of the metaphysics of the world that are based on interpretation of, like I said, Gandalf's conversation with Frodo in Bag End, and trying to triangulate statements. So in that sense, it is a well-founded theory. Mm-hmm. I think that it would be very defensible to have this understanding, though.
Oh yeah, you sold me on it. As far as I'm concerned, it's basically canon. It's just I if the show writers knew the lore, then they would I feel like understand all of this too. That was the head scratcher I'm working at right now.
Yeah, and based on the depth that the show writers have shown of their knowledge of the lore, they would know this. So I have to assume that they would know it and do know it and have chosen to do this for some other reason.
That's odd. Also, so after it comes out that the Dwarven rings somehow are affecting King Durin, Sauron just masterfully blames Celebrimbor for the ring's corruption. After he calls him out and says, "Did you do something to the rings?" He's like, No. You lied. You did something to the rings. You need to either atone right now, or you need and leave and go to your king and atone, which gets him what he wants because then he has unfettered access to the forage, or you need to keep going through with it and see this through to the end. But it was you who did this, not me.
And I think this is another great example of the best lies being mostly true, because I bet that in this telling of the story, I bet that Celebrimbor's deception to Gil-galad was one factor that tainted the Dwarven rings.
Yeah, I wouldn't be that surprised. Even if it's not true, though, it works really good. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that kind of made these items slightly cursed. I'm sure that wasn't the only thing, though.
No, absolutely not. The other major factor in this was when Sauron held the mithril and dropped it into the forge. There was that sinister chanting that I commented going on.
Yeah.
And that was the other, possibly bigger contribution to the shadiness of the Dwarven rings. Sauron touching the metal, but also, I fully believe Anatar's analysis of this, that Celebrimbor's deception added an element of evil to the Dwarven rings. I think that in this instance, Anatar is speaking the truth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if I personally take it that far. I think that for me, it'd be a more interesting story if it was it didn't actually metaphysically affect the rings, but it still would be an example of a good lie being true, because he is pointing at what he did and making him feel guilty about it. So it really doesn't, in the end, matter how much it actually affected the rings or not. I suppose what really matters is how it affects Celebrimbor's actions going forward, and he's using shame to kind of leash him in and do what he wants. Mm-hmm. One way or the other, if he responds to it by fessing up or by, as he said, going through and seeing it through to the other side.
Yeah. I feel like the ingredient of deceit is exactly how the magic of Middle-earth would work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I do not have nearly enough context to understand either way.
Yeah. No, that's understandable.
I will say that it is kind of interesting, how you have to consent to evil as an idea. And so, maybe the rings really couldn't have been corrupted at all if Celebrimbor, who was ostensibly good, didn't open that first crack to let Sauron put in all the evil he wanted.
Yeah, if it wasn't for that consent of deception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder how different things would have been.
I really like that spin on it. That's really good.
Yeah. Celebrimbor, at this point, deteriorates really fast. He is forgetting people's names. But what really convinced me was his short temper was very concerning. He seems like he's not himself whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably not eating and not sleeping, and getting manipulated by Anatar never does anything good for your health.
Yeah, yeah. And so he decides to let Anatar kind of run things other than the forge in his town.
He's got more important things to do.
Yeah, I don't get how all the people are, like, I know they had the one forge who was right by his side, but there was, like, other people who probably haven't seen him much for weeks, and then all of a sudden this guy's, like, saying, I'm on his behalf, and we need to hide this message from him because it'll stress him out. Like, I don't know how everybody would buy that so easily, is what is concerning to me. I know he's the Lord of Deceit, but, like, I don't know, all the other people not just going along with it was very confusing to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the time frame on things is. I don't know how long Anatar's been there. But Anatar definitely knows the rest of the smithing guild. Yeah,
all the other smiths I could get. It's just they're like the people who, you know, were holding him up at the front gate and stuff like that. Like they probably hadn't seen too much of what was going on in the forge, and now they all of a sudden they see this guy coming back to the front gate, and there's that courier with a message carved into him. And he's just like, don't tell him. Like, that is crazy to me. That, like, I would think at least one person's like, we got to let him know about this.
I would imagine that it's probably common knowledge that Anatar has been sent as an emissary of the Valar.
Yeah, that is a good point. If that's how he's been introduced or sold to the people, maybe that would work well.
Yeah.
In his favor and in the end it does work. So maybe that's a good explanation for it.
Yeah, I mean, eventually it comes out. Anatar is so cunning, though, that he hides that admission with a lie of flattery. When he says, I told you that the Valar sent me. Well, they didn't need you. I need you. It switches the attention from the fact that he lied to the ego stroking that is the flattery.
Yeah, he's still keeping up the guise that he's Anatar, though, right? Just that the Valar didn't send him directly for this purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a very good way to switch it out. There is also a scene, where Celebrimbor hears, like, siege gates. I feel like Sauron hates having to do this, but he, like, magically shows him that the town is fine. And I think this kind of also goes with, like, Sauron at the very least, maybe not evil generally, but Sauron really likes to be able to do, like, a clean deception where he doesn't have to resort to magic. Like, I feel like that's his last resort, and he hates to do it, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
He could convince him a lot stronger if he used it more frequently, but I think it ruins the fun for him.
Yeah, I can see that.
Also in these two episodes, I call it Sauron, Avatar described the rings as precious. The first time I kind of let slide, but he does it a second time in this last scene here. And it was a lot more, he drew it out a lot more. It was a lot slower. Precious. Like, I'm sure that was on purpose.
Anytime the word precious is used in anything Lord of the Rings, it is of notable and significant value. Yeah.
The first time he said it, I just thought it was like a nice little quick nod, not worth mentioning, but they're hammering it home now.
Yeah.
Also, when he does this deception, I'm wondering if all the town people panicking outside saw Celebrimbor just, like, walking around in a daze thinking that everything's fine.
I think they did.
That would have been concerning.
I think they did because I think Anatar might have limits to the amount of visible deception he can control, and I think controlling everyone's view of Celebrimbor may have been too much for his processing.
Yeah, or just, like, the other alternative would be, like, creating visual space for Celebrimbor to walk around that wasn't based off reality. Like, I feel like he just put a skin over what was actually there.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like, a complete headspace hallucination. Although it could have been, I guess, if we look at how he did that mind battle with Galadriel. But I just feel like it'd be a lot more concerning and a lot darker and a lot better visually to show him walking around in a daze looking at everything.
His people would understand that he doesn't care about them at that point.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot to worry about, and they heard that he had a mental break, so maybe they'd be a little bit understanding, but I think their first the first thing they would think is, oh, that guy really did lose it, and the second thing they need to think is, like, I need to grab my children from this burning village.
And then they realized that Anatar was right all along reporting his mental break.
Yeah. it does double work for him too.
Next up, we have Numenor.
So very early on, Pharazon's talking with his son, who kind of gets to delegate to do most of the bad things as we go through Numenor. He withholds information because of some kind of protest, some of his commands from his dead mother to get him to do what he wants, and that is just like straight up evil. Like, Pharazon's been kind of a charming villain, but that was just like almost next level for me.
Yeah, Pharazon and Kemen's relationship is very different from Pharazon as politician.
It shows also a scene with Elendil kind of being supported by a lot of the former Sea Guard. I feel like they were setting him up to be a rival to Pharazon. I don't think a lot of the people like generally are going to go with him, though. He's good for the job, but he's not good at politics.
No, and Elendil doesn't want the job either. No. Like, he knows he's not good at politics. He's not trying to be good at politics.
Yeah. It's just it seems like they were called the Sea Guard, right?
Yeah.
His former military faction really has his back, but he's not really about it. He argues with his daughter here. He says her path is made of seawater. It was really bad.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad line. That's like some season 1 level of dialogue there.
That was awful. I noted here that Gil-galad, Miriel, and King Durin all have people doubting their magical premonitions with them as leaders.
Yep.
Although Miriel's with a Palantir and Gil-galad and King Durin are with Rings of Power, but still, it's an interesting theme that's definitely running throughout the show.
Definitely, and worth noting.
Also, like, what religion... They end up in a church... What religion is this? This would be the Valar, right?
So there's very little about established religion in the Legendarium.
Mm-hmm.
The most detail about religion there is centers around Numenorian culture.
Okay, that's good at least.
Yep. Rings of Power is adapting what their vision might look like.
Mm-hmm.
In the lore, officially, there are 3 yearly observances to Eru directly. And these are conducted by the ruler of Numenor at the top of the mountain at the center of their island, called the Meneltarma.
Mm-hmm.
So the existence of a shrine for the common people to the Valar is not explicitly supported from the text.
No, yeah, I don't know. It just didn't feel like it fit in Lord of the Rings.
Because setting. Lord of the Rings doesn't deal with religion.
Right. Like and I feel like there's not a lot of churches and stuff like that because
none.
There are, and you never see them, never hear of them because the Valar are the gods. Their emissaries would be the Iluvatar, right, and stuff like that. Or no, not the what are the angels called?
The Maiar.
Yeah, the Maiar. They have people to send to Middle Earth to directly influence things.
The Astari.
Yes, the Astari, exactly.
So, yeah, you have Eru Iluvatar, who's the creator god of the entire world.
Way up top.
He created the Ainur. And then the Ainur have 2 classes, the Valar and the Maiar, but they're the same in kind, even if not the same in class.
Right.
And of the Maiar, some are embodied to become Astari.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, and like the Astari especially make me feel like it's pretty doubtful, like, that people would be sitting around like trying to pray to Valar because Valar reach out to you through Astari, you know?
So, my generous takes are that the Valar have been especially absent from the world for the past many thousand years.
Yeah.
Like, the last time there's been a lot of direct Valar intervention was at the end of the First Age, which is like... I want to say like 4,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's going back to Moses' time.
Sure.
From our perspective. If the last time God intervened was with a burning bush or some plagues to Egypt.
Well, we got people with temples to that right now.
Yeah. But if that was the truly last time something happened, that would be a pretty absent mythology.
Yeah. I feel like... Sure, if you have these gods who come and then disappear, like, then you get religions with temples and stuff like that. But I just feel like if the gods were directly interacting in a verifiable way, you wouldn't have temples or churches or what have you.
Yeah. Exactly. And so that's what I'm trying to say is that the Valar have been absent for so many thousand years that from the anthropology of this, I'm trying to give it the generous take that maybe you would have shrines to Valar pop up.
Sure. Okay, I could follow that. So the Valar are gone. The Astari haven't been showing up too much in the Númenóreans' lives, at least, either.
No, the Astari have not played a role yet. I mean, we know that the Stranger is an Astari. That's not a spoiler. That has been established at this point. And he just got here, and he's on the far side of Middle-earth. The Númenóreans don't know anything about him.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that this Dark Wizard's an Astari too, maybe, but I guess it hasn't been confirmed.
I'm not going to say anything about spoilers either way. If you're right or if you're wrong, I'm just going to try to stay as neutral as I can on things that have not been established yet. But even if the Dark Wizard is an Astari, he's also on the far side of Middle-earth, and the Númenóreans probably don't know about him.
Yeah, that's fair. So Isildur's friend, I forget his name. He's like Elendil's number one supporter. He gets backstabbed in a pretty brutal way.
This would be Valandil.
It was Valandil. Yeah, his death was really rough. Just the absolute betrayal after giving Pharazôn's son mercy. He lays his sword down, turns around, and then gets stabbed right in the back by that same sword.
Yep.
And it was at Elendil's direction to spare him, and all Elendil holds him and just whispers softly, no. That was soul-crushing to watch.
The reason I remember that this is Valandil is because Isildur goes on to have a son named Valandil.
Oh, okay. So in honor of him.
And I like this story that Rings of Power is giving Isildur's son's name.
Yeah, definitely gives it like some characterization.
Yeah.
I really like it. I am curious here. They were considering executing Elendil because he won't swear fealty to Pharazôn, but I'm wondering how Muriel is even still around if this is what Pharazôn's doing. Like, why is he not executing her?
Maybe because she's his cousin?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think Pharazôn's doing it for the right reasons. The only way I could see him is he somehow thinks it would backfire, but I don't know. I don't see that really being... I can only see it hurting more than it helps, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a theory that builds on stuff in the books that I don't want to spoil for you. Okay,
and then just now talking about it, I have another generous take on it, that since she is blind, she's seen as an illegitimate ruler, and like she can't rule. Because I'm thinking about it, they would blind people they didn't want to execute because of religious reasons in, like I said, the Eastern Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So maybe he just sees her as being legitimately, nobody's going to swear fealty to her except for a few crazy people.
Yeah, and why should he dirty his hands with something like that if...
she's already out of the picture.
Exactly.
But Muriel kind of does the dirty work for him. Is like the next scene that happens, she offers to take Elendil's execution, or they do a trial, right, where they have to walk into the sea.
Yeah, a trial by combat, basically. Yeah.
Well, they used to do sort of things like this before, we had a real justice system. I guess, like they would burn you, and if it doesn't heal quick enough, then God deems that you're guilty and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I don't see how the win condition on this for the accused, though. Like, you jump off a cliff, right, into the sea. Like, how are you going to survive that if there's not a giant monster?
Well, she wasn't killed by getting into the water.
Yeah. Also, was this a sea monster? Was this a sea monster who spared Sauron, or a different one?
I don't know that it's conclusive, but I believe it's the same one.
Noted.
Which is why I've been asking who the sea monster works for this entire time, and I'm skeptical that it's Sauron. I think that this might be actually a physical manifestation of Ulmo, maybe, the Vala of the seas, or maybe just working on his behalf.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see your next note. You also had a note about the trial of the trial.
Yeah, I want to make a note about the metaphysics of trial by combat or trial by sea monster, or basically I call it trial by tempting God.
Yeah.
Because what this is you're creating a situation and then saying, God, we are forcing you to intervene.
Yeah. I know that for similar reason the church frowns on gambling.
I'm not aware that the Catholic Church frowns on gambling inherently. There's obviously irresponsible gambling,
I don't know for sure which branches, but the ones that the whichever branches of Christianity are against gambling are against it because it calls you pray on God to it tests faith basically because you're gonna pray to God that you get that right hand and then you don't get it and then you're in a crisis of faith, you know.
Yeah, and certainly if you're making it religious gambling, I can see the point there.
Yeah, it's definitely, I could totally see why certain churches would be about that. I'm going to look into the Catholic. I think the Catholic Church is pretty not great on gambling. I think they consider it a sin.
Okay, I'm pretty sure they don't.
Okay,
We'll follow up on this.
Okay, I know for certain that some churches do, but which ones
some Protestant churches definitely do.
Yeah,
but trial by tempting God was definitely something that happened historically. Mm-hmm. I'm not denying the existence of it, but it was a practice that was forbidden by the Catholic Church, since one cannot and should not try to force God to do anything. I wonder what this show may or may not build around the idea that this practice is one of the faithful's practices. I wonder if maybe this is a corruption through the millennia of what the faithful should be doing, that they've picked up this practice the same way that, medieval Catholics picked up this practice, even though the Catholic Church said they shouldn't do it. Right. Did the faithful pick up this practice despite the fact that the Valar probably would tell them they shouldn't do it? Yeah. It's kind of like those shrines. Like, the shrines have some issues with, having shrines to the Valar is a little different than the praying to Eru that the king does in the book. Mm-hmm. So maybe the shrines to the Valar and the trial by tempting God are superstitions that the faithful have picked up along the way.
Yeah, I could see that, especially, they're an island nation. They can't really confirm it with any other cultures if this is what they're doing to appease or talk to the Valar.
And there are no other cultures that have the Númenóreans' relationship to the Valar and Eru. No,
it definitely seems like they are just making stuff up at some point, though.
Yeah. So heading back to Middle-earth, first up we have the smallest note about Pelargir.
Yeah, there's only one scene. It shows Arondir running through a forest and fighting some of these guys. I think, is he hunting down Theo?
Hunting down seems aggressive to me, but looking for might be a description I could get behind.
Tracking Theo?
Yeah.
Looking for Theo?
Yeah. Theo's been captured. He's trying to find him.
Okay, and that's all that happens.
Yeah. Well, we got Adar back for at least one more round of notes. I decided to call it Adar instead of Galadriel, just so that we could have Adar around.
Yeah. So Adar does know that Halbrand is Sauron, he says during their conversation.
At some time he's figured it out, yeah.
Why isn't Galadriel sharing this and, everyone sharing this as widely as possible? It seems like it's only to their benefit that they could said, Sauron's around, we've seen him, be on the lookout for any charming, deceitful, magical people. Definitely don't treat with Halbrand. I think that it would not hurt. What concealing this would only hurt them.
Yeah, I'm not sure precisely why this is going on.
She's very tight-lipped, even when Adar directly says it. She's like, "Oh, I don't want to." It looks like she doesn't want to tell him.
Well, she doesn't want to talk to Adar because Adar's an orc.
Yeah, that might be it.
I do really like Adar's analysis of Sauron, though, as he's talking about who Sauron is, what his motives are, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Adar has such a good pulse on Sauron. Every time he talks about him, I love what Adar has to say.
Yeah.
I do want to make one note that Morgoth's crown becomes Morgoth's collar when the Valar come in and take him down.
Oh.
So, in the lore, Morgoth's collar would not be around at this point. I'm totally happy to play with this one, though. I really like the idea of having this artifact that they can use for stuff. I think it's really fun in the adaptation.
Yeah, and it kind of helps elucidate how they managed to kill Sauron a bit.
Yeah.
Even though he still probably wouldn't have gotten himself in a position where he could have a magical artifact used on him. At least it wasn't just a bunch of orcs with their little knives.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to some things about the crown that I don't like later on, but for now, the existence of the crown playing a role in the story is something that I actually really like.
I love Adar a lot, but I do not get what he's doing at this point. He goes off and he attacks. It's Eregion where Celebrimbor is, right?
Yes.
Why? I don't understand his goal and motivation here if they both agree Sauron's their enemy.
He's trying to go kill Sauron.
Yeah.
Sauron's an Eregion. He's here to take down Sauron. So he's going to take down Eregion to do it.
I don't know. Maybe he doesn't understand the rings and all that, but I feel like Galadriel was kind of propositioning to help him dispose of the rings, right?
I thought that they were trying to figure out how to dispose of Sauron. Galadriel does not want to dispose of her ring.
No, she doesn't want to, but I thought in this conversation she mentioned that that's what they're going to do. There was definitely some disagreement about what they should do, though.
Yeah.
And I feel like just going over there to kill Sauron might not work out. But, Adar has the best track record of anybody that we know of so far in this world. So
he's killed Sauron more times than anyone else.
Yeah, maybe I should trust him a bit. I'm sure it'll work out well.
Well, as we continue our path eastwards, next we have the Harfoots.
I liked the little scene where they had the stores and the leader of them teaching Nori about like what a home is and why they like having a home. I do think it's a bad reason, though, like, to stand and get attacked. Like, they should just run.
Yeah.
But it was a nice characterization.
I can understand wanting to stand on your home ground if you think that running will be pointless anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't think it is also in their case.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's definitely something that people with different, carrots and sticks in their society they would rather die than abandon where they grew up, which I don't know, it's not the weirdest thing, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely weirder things to die for.
I think Tom asking the stranger why he thinks he should have power over like who lives and dies and to choose his destiny, it feels more like a test on the stranger than him actually trying to convince him to abandon his friends.
I totally agree. This was a test on Tom Bombadil's part. Mm-hmm. That said, I still don't like it. I don't like Tom Bombadil reversing the quote that Gandalf later says to Frodo. Tom Bombadil here says, "Some who live deserve death, some who die deserve life. Can you give it to them?" in the context of an entirely opposite situation of what Frodo is hypothetically imagining.
Yeah.
Frodo is imagining killing Gollum, who arguably deserves death. And the stranger is considering going off to try to save his friends from deathly perils and to intervene and cause them to live. It's an entirely reversed lesson. And I don't think that Gandalf giving this bit of wisdom to Frodo needs to be learned in this manner.
I don't know. It's hard to say because I have to see how it plays out. I mean, if it turns out that he's supposed to take Tom's advice as poor and go save his friends, and it was a test to see if he could think for his own by Tom.
Yeah, it's a test.
That's one thing. The saying still, it's another deceit, like with a lie, like or it's another deceit, but with some truth. Like it's ultimately not true, right? But it's still, there are times where even, I assume, Astari can't save everybody or something like that. And he kind of has to, he's not saying like, kill whoever you need to get to the end, but he's saying when you're faced with saving people's lives and cutting off other things like your path, your progress and stuff like that, will you be able to turn a blind eye to that? Which, again, since it's a test, I think it's pretty good, but I don't I get the philosophy and understanding, especially coming from somebody who's all powerful. I mean, Tom Bombadil's the master of a forest. He's probably seen, in some case, like animals who get predated on too soon and stuff like that. He seems like a very neutral, not a very good or evil character in this depiction. Mm-hmm. He seems like kind of like nature is his whole thing, and nature isn't really good.
We'll have to look at his characterization in the books when we get there.
Sure.
So I think that does it for our rings. Now let's do our things. So for Wizard's Wisdom, I have... Ye rings of men, why do you still defy me? You who live not, breathe not, possess not mind nor will, what pride is woven in your inmost self that you resist my hand? This is the speech that Celebrimbor gives when he's frustrated with making the 9 rings.
Yeah.
It's so eloquent. It's so poetic. It has that question of the Ubisunt poetry in it. It's not quite Ubisunt poetry, but
Yeah.
but the what pride, what darkness. It's not where questions, but the fact that we're opening with question after question kind of makes me think of that.
Yeah.
And it's so eloquent.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like something that would be ripped from the texts of Lord of the Rings somewhere.
Yeah, this totally feels like Tolkien, and it's totally not.
Yeah, and it really shows, like, Celebrimbor delivered it really well, too. It shows how, absolutely, like, mad he's going.
Can we get more lines like this and fewer lines about paths made of seawater?
Yeah. I think he even said the path you walk is made of seawater. It's like, what? You swim in water. Elendil did have a good quote. It's what I picked for this episode's Wizard Wisdom. He said, "It's hardly a mercy to ask a man to set his integrity aflame," which I liked. I'm glad they didn't ruin it by making it a nautical or sea metaphor.
Yeah, this one's a good quote, and I had another one from Elendil. "I would rather die with a heart that is whole than live with one that is broken by cowardice."
Yeah, I think this was the same conversation with his daughter about how he needs to deny his claim to Muriel.
No, mine came from his conversation with Muriel.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, Elendil had a lot of screen time in this episode.
He's such a good character.
Yeah, I like Elendil quite a bit.
Me too. Next up, we have a language, lore, and letters. Reading the Lord of the Rings books is almost directly upon us. So to prepare, I would like to use the next few episodes to cover the prologue to the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right.
As we go through the prologue and Lord of the Rings itself, I'm going to read along in Hammond and Skull's Reader's Companion to the Lord of the Rings. It's a wonderful book full of explanations and information. Like all good Lord of the Rings adaptations, Lord of the Rings itself has a prologue.
Yes.
But this prologue is not exactly the beginning of the story. It's background information. And it's not just like explaining how the rings came into being, background information, or how Morgoth killed the trees, background information. This is like nerdy information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so
this is world building.
Right. We're the first passage is called Concerning Hobbits.
Yep. And we used some passages from the prologue for our Tolkien Reading Day episode.
Yeah.
So, first, the prologue establishes the frame narrative. We've talked about this before. The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings are themselves adaptations. Words in the prologue say derived from or translated. And our Hobbit and our Lord of the Rings come from a document called the Red Book of Westmarch.
Yes. I know I've said it before. I probably will say it again, but I really like this framing device for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
I really like it too, and I think it's really important and underemphasized in a lot of areas. The beginning chapters were, quote, composed by Bilbo himself. That's like the material that The Hobbit is derived from. And we'll later learn that the rest of the Red Book of Westmarch is written by Frodo and edited and completed by Sam.
So this might be a bit of a nuts and bolts question, but can you tell, like The Hobbit, you mentioned it has a different feeling to it because it's a children's book. Does it feel like Bilbo's a different writer than Frodo when you're reading these books through? 1,
absolutely. And 2, what I noticed on this read-through of the prologue that I've never noticed before is that what the prologue says is further information will also be found in the selection from the Red Book of Westmarch that has already been published under the title of The Hobbit. That story was derived from the earlier chapters of the Red Book composed by Bilbo himself, the first Hobbit to become famous in the world at large, and called by him there and back again, since they told of his journey into the East and his return, an adventure which later involved all the hobbits in the great events of that age that are here related. And so I guess I'm not seeing the word translated at all in the prologue. There's explicit references to translation in the appendices of The Return of the King. But what I notice here is that it says that The Hobbit was derived from the initial chapters of the Red Book of Westmarch, which leads me to believe that there's a much heavier editorial hand taken by Tolkien in his representation of the original manuscript.
Yes.
Therefore, some of the tonal difference between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, I think, should be ascribed to Tolkien's editing it into a children's novel as opposed to more faithfully translating word for word.
Okay, I see. Yeah, no, they definitely mention a few times. I thought, like you said in this prologue, maybe it was later somewhere, that it was translated from different languages.
Ultimately, The Lord of the Rings is translated from the language that it was written in, which is Westron, or the Common Speech. Mm-hmm. And it may be mentioned later in the prologue as well.
So, concerning Hobbits.
Yeah, diving into some of the information we get there. There's a distinction made between the Hobbit's use of machines and tools. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a little bit of my speculation based on what we see examples, but I wonder if a machine is something which does an activity faster, better, or bigger than an equivalent done by hand. Mm-hmm. Whereas I wonder if a tool allows a new skill to take place. So I wonder if machines might be a little more industrial than tools. The examples of machines that the hobbits use are a forge bellows, a water mill, and a hand loom, all of whose purposes I think can be replicated in some more primitive way.
My understanding about the difference, and this is only like a linguistic, I know that there's probably technical, scientific distinctions between machine and tools, but I feel like a tool can be applied to many different jobs where a machine typically would only have one.
Oh, that's another great distinction to be made, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when you talk about a tool, like there's some very specialized tools, but they ultimately have more than one use.
A screwdriver is always for screwing screws, but why you're screwing screws can be very broad.
Yes. Yeah, and then the machine, well, I don't know, it could be argued that like a water mill is a machine, but it could be used to grind up bread or run a log cutter or something though too. So I don't know exactly if that's a great distinction, but that's kind of at least initially my thought.
Yeah, the water mill made me think of millers, like grain grinders.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking of it as, you could grind grain by hand, but the water mill lets you do it faster, better, bigger.
Yeah, a water mill technically is only used for milling, but a water wheel could be used for many things. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is even really where I stand for sure, but I generally got like, and also like a machine is usually more all-encompassing, like it's all you'll need to complete a task, where a tool is usually only for like a step of the task as well.
That's another great point. I love this.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm that's where I am sitting. But I do like the fact that they have machines, but they're very, as he elucidates, simple.
Yeah. So Bilbo's skill at being stealthy was established in The Hobbit. But that trait is reiterated again in the prologue as one shared among all hobbits in general. We are assured that this skill is not magical, nor do hobbits have any sort of magic. Rather, this skill comes from heredity, practice, and a close friendship with the earth. I like that phrase, close friendship with the earth.
Yes. Yeah, and it definitely, I like also that he says that it seems magical, but it isn't. It's very illustrative of describing how the hobbits would hide away.
Yeah, and it establishes hobbits as a purely mundane society, which makes them more relatable to us. There's no secret elvish blood. There's no blessing by the Valar that's extending their lives or something setting them apart. The hobbits really are just normal people.
Yeah. I will say that this, when they were talking about how they're good at hiding, made me think of the first episodes of Rings of Power with Nori and her clan hiding from those two guys walking.
Yep. And it's totally playing off the entirely canonical stealthiness that hobbits have naturally.
Yes.
The narrator tells us in the prologue that hobbits are growing shorter, as though they still exist in the world, which I like. They were once taller, but now seldom reach 3 feet.
Mm-hmm.
In the book called Unfinished Tales, Tolkien says that, quote, the average height of a male adult hobbit was taken as 3'6".
This also made me think of a weird thing they included in one of the animated films we watched. I think it was Bakshi. No, it was...
It was the Rankin Bass Return of the King.
Rankin Bass Return of the King. They talked about how the hobbits were growing in height.
Yeah, which
was weird.
Which was really weird and was entirely Rankin Bass Return of the King. It makes me cringe every time I think of it.
I think they were trying to get at that hobbits eventually became people in Rankin Bass.
Yeah, that was what they were saying, that, you know, that hobbits were going to evolve into men.
Yeah. Yeah, it was odd. Very odd compared to this prologue.
Yes, very odd. The prologue also establishes that hobbits generally go barefoot and have hair on their feet. Now, in popular culture, a lot of people think that hobbits have big feet. But I want to point out that nowhere here does it say that their feet are noticeably bigger than proportionate to their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So, historically, in the primary world, the idea that hobbits have big feet come from the art that the brothers Hildebrand did. They depicted hobbits with big feet, and this contribution to the art medium of Lord of the Rings has been replicated and just accepted by a lot of fans as canonical, even though it's not in the text.
So my theory upon hearing you mention that their feet aren't bigger was going to be that they had to, for the live action film, wear prosthetic feet that just made their feet look big, and everyone ran with it. That was going to be my theory.
And I think that played into reinforcing the brothers Hildebrand art.
Yeah, but I feel like with how much Peter Jackson kind of was on the pulse for the greater Lord of the Rings, like he would have probably known about the Hildebrand art and
absolutely
the understanding that people already think they have big feet. So I think he kind of played into it a bit, maybe. I'm not sure.
Probably. But it's purely from adaptations and art that we get this idea in pop culture. It's not actually in the books.
Yeah, I kind of like picturing the hobbits with like proportionate but small, tough, hairy feet.
Yep. The prologue also says that, quote, the only craft little practiced among the hobbits was shoemaking, implying that it was practiced by some.
Yeah, I noticed that too. That, like, practice little by hobbits usually doesn't, that like he would have said not at all. So there are some hobbits out there with shoes.
Especially in the region of the Shire called the Marish, farmers were likely to wear boots.
Oh, well, that makes sense, yeah. Shoes seem like a very highly specialized thing. Like, maybe like rubber overalls, but for hobbits.
Yeah, and when you're living in the marsh, maybe it's more useful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The prologue goes on to establish that hobbits are actually a kind of human. The narrator cites linguistic evidence for this. Because of course he does, Tolkien. He says that how exactly hobbits came into existence is basically unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But that they are definitely related to the humans of the world.
Yeah, and he uses linguistic evidence, which is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. I personally like the thought that one of the Valar blessed a subgroup of humans and they became the hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
So that they have some special attention from one of the Valar. Not magic exactly, because I was just saying about how hobbits are non-magical, but they have this friendship with the earth. So maybe like the Valar of the earth, like Yavanna, might have paid special attention to the men who really liked the earth, for example.
Yeah, I was going the opposite way. I was completely like scientificationing this again and imagining they just had, divergent cultures and hobbits were probably stuck in a valley where they had little outside influence and just kind of are a half subhuman, like just a little branch off a human.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Valar one a little better, though.
That's just totally my headcanon. Very little textual evidence for this. Entirely speculation, and if someone wanted to scientificate this instead, I wouldn't have text to indicate that was incorrect. Mm-hmm. Because we don't know how hobbits came into existence.
I put this note at the end because he mentions it a lot, and we're going to talk about later, but there isn't any documentation, but I want there to be some sort of like archaeologist, anthropologist style study of proto-hobbits and man in Middle Earth. I want to know more about what they were like and how they lived.
We need to find an anthropologist, archaeologist, and have them on the podcast to give us a theoretical analysis of what this might look like.
I think they would need some data to go off of, which sadly we have none.
The prologue says, quote, "The beginning of hobbits lies far back in the Elder Days," end quote. The Elder Days is also known as the First Age. Mm-hmm. So I think it is abundantly appropriate to bring a Hobbit storyline into the Second Age in Rings of Power.
Yeah, they had a whole age to form.
Yep. The existence of the Harfoots is a little bit of a divisive issue in the fandom, as I understand it. So,
is there textual evidence that people dislike it, or?
I mean, basically they just say that hobbits didn't enter the historical record until the Third Age, so why are there hobbits in the Second Age?
Okay.
But there's this line right here in the prologue that isn't even hard to find. It's not like it's buried in Volume 7 in a footnote in the History of Middle-earth.
Yeah, this is in Concerning Hobbits.
Yeah, so I don't really understand why there's so much opposition to the existence of the Harfoots in Rings of Power. I also have some issues with how they're depicted. Sometimes the execution doesn't always suit me for the Harfoots, but that's very different than saying hobbits shouldn't exist in the Second Age.
Based off what I read and everything I did, I think the Harfoots are pretty much great. I like them too, but I also like the fact that they are a wheel-focused society. I feel like that is oddly specific in a way that it tickles my brain right.
I'm glad. I am exactly that kind of fan who wants hobbits in every story that I can get hobbits.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe my generous take for the haters are that they feel like it's kind of shoehorned in again and just appealing to people who like hobbits like you and I suppose. Yeah,
I think that's probably some of the factors, but I am exactly that person who wants to see my hobbits.
Yeah. And even, I might be agnostic. I think I could see where talking about cutting the hobbits out of Rings of Power and cutting the stranger story out so far wouldn't have had much of an effect on anything else so much, and it wouldn't have hurt too much, but I think it's definitely not the most hard part to get through for me. For me, unfortunately, that's Valinor, because Numenor is hard to get through, which sucks because Numenor seems like Numenor I recognize by name because they talked about it so much in the Peter Jackson films and stuff like that. But I'm really not happy with Numenor because it's very boring.
Season 1 is the hardest part for me to get through.
Season 1 Numenor was by far the worst. Season 2 Numenor is better than most scenes in Season 1, and it's still the worst part of Season 2, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But bringing it back to our reading, the Hobbits being in the Second Age has, as far as I could tell, no reason to be hated on.
No. I definitely like the existence of the Hobbit storyline. But the Lord of the Rings itself has a Hobbit bias, since, it's written by hobbits. And the prologue acknowledges that the rest of the legendarium contains an elf bias. Quote, "Only the elves still preserve any record of that vanished time, the First Age, and their traditions are concerned almost entirely with their own history, in which men appear seldom and hobbits are not mentioned at all." So when we read something like the Silmarillion, we're not getting a hobbit perspective, we're getting an elven perspective. And it was actually the fact that there was an elven perspective that lacked hobbits that made me stop reading the Silmarillion when I was 11. I was like halfway through the Silmarillion. I got through all the roughest bits, and I was like, where are my hobbits? I'm halfway through this, and there's still no hobbits. And so I started searching the index in the back for Hobbit or Frodo or anything, and there was like one mention at the very end, and I was like, I'm not going to keep reading this anymore because there's no hobbits.
Yeah. The fact that he mentioned again that this is what made me make my note about how I wanted the anthropologist study on proto-hobbits from the formation in the First Age, because there's so many cultures like we don't have any clue from their writing what was going on in the in contemporary real world history. but we know we're there because other people wrote about them very briefly, and we found where they lived and looked at what they had and stuff like that. And I think I really need this for the Hobbits.
I agree. I'm always here for more Hobbit information. Well, it sounds like you have some questions, and we also have a question that needs answering.
So the question reads, do we ever get an explanation of the Mordor societal hierarchy? Like, we see humans and orcs, but does it ever get established that there's only a military hierarchy, or does it an aristocratic class exist as well? I like to imagine evil leader guys looking at the art they stole from conquered lands, our secret orcish admirer.
So, as with our other questions about orcs, there is a distinct lack of information, but I'll do what I can with what we have. First of all, there's the Goblin King from The Hobbit. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose that being a king, he is aristocracy. But there's nothing further in the lore about his lineage. Alongside that, there's Azog, who was a powerful orc leader. He's not called a king, and his depiction in the books is different than his depiction in the Hobbit trilogy. In a footnote to Appendix A in The Return of the King, it says that Azog was the father of Bolg, and Bolg was the leader of the Goblin army in the Battle of the Five Armies. Mm-hmm. Which this gives us an indication of the existence of an orcish aristocracy, if only from the heredity of the situation. Mm-hmm. So I surmise that situations like this, whether with the Goblin King or Azog and Bolg, will only exist in so-called free orcish societies, because I can't see Sauron tolerating upstart orcish kings.
Yeah. Do you think Sauron... Well, we know he has a few, at least, orcish lieutenants. Do you think he would have, like, orcish, I don't know, dukes or counts or barons?
I think captain is about as high as you get.
Yeah. Yeah, I could also see that. Sauron does not seem like he would want to delegate.
I think the hierarchy that Sauron would use is that military hierarchy that our questioner mentioned.
Yeah, you definitely see some sort of hierarchy there, but it does seem almost just like strictly military based. I wonder who like the highest orc in Sauron's society is.
That's a good question.
Like, who's the leader of the orcish army, and how much?
Oh, that's the Ringwraiths.
Oh, the Ringwraiths would be the leader, and then so whoever would be right under those Ringwraiths, I'd want to meet.
Yeah, but they don't run the army.
The Ringwraiths don't run the army?
No, the orcs under the Ringwraiths don't run the army. It's the Ringwraiths who do the commanding. Specifically, the Witch King has many forces.
Yeah, I still like the way that military hierarchies work. I still want to see the highest powered orcs. But the Ringwraiths being a good buffer between Sauron and the orcs is very... I like that a lot. It makes it like so he doesn't have to really interact with them at all. Yeah,
Sauron doesn't like the orcs.
No, he does not. The free orcs, I think they remind me a lot historically of, if we're talking about like the social hierarchy, like Proto-Nordic and Irish had petty kings and a bunch of different tribes and clans and stuff like that. That's kind of how I imagine the non-Sauron orcs.
Yeah, I can see a similar parallel there.
Like it specifically also like in like Norway, they had like a period, in Ireland too, like they had a period where there was like hundreds of kings like in the country, like every baron was calling himself king, you know. I feel like orcs would very much be into that.
Yeah, every hill had a king.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think orcs would put any value on the art they found in their raids, though. Orcs generally destroy and mutilate any art they find, like the statue that Frodo and Sam see on their way through Ithilien.
Would the Witch King, would he would like art maybe?
That's an interesting thought. I want to say that he's lost so much of his humanity that he's lost that capability, but I think he's definitely of a different class than the orcs.
We don't get much characterization with him. You know, maybe the orcs and even the wraiths could like the defiled art as art, though. Like they take home the statue after it's been defiled.
Maybe. I could see that.
So that's all we have. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram through the links in our description. Please follow, like, and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and other major podcasting platforms. To have your question or comment featured on the podcast, please send an email to shirepost.ringsandthings@gmail.com.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please consider contributing to our efforts through the Patreon link in the description.
A hearty hobbity thank you to our first supporter, Lori J. from Florida. We are deeply grateful for your support.
A special thank you to our editor and spiritual producer, Stephen Jeffrey, and thank you for listening.